Hi, this is a look at some data from Google Trends. So I'll be exploring how often people search for the terms depression and anxiety from 2004 to the present, 2021. Now, Google Trends is a service that lets you look at, you guessed it, trends and what people use Google to search for. So after downloading this data, I uploaded it to GitHub as a gist, which just allows me an easy, convenient way to access it from within this collab notebook. I load this URL with pandas into a data frame, good to go. And this is what it looks like. Got a month column, and then we've got a column for each of our search terms. Now, the numbers you get from Google are a little bit wonky. This number 100 right here is the ceiling. So Google looks over all of your search terms across every month, and it finds which term, which month had the highest number of results. So here this tells us that depression was searched for in April 2004 more than anything else. And every other number that we see is relative to this ceiling. So in January 2004, people searched for depression 80% as much as they did April 2004. And in February 2004, people searched for anxiety 32% as much as they did depression in April 2004. So we've got 208 rows, that means 208 months and 17.3 years of data. And the one other little thing here I want to point out is the standard deviation. So depression, notice, has a slightly lower standard deviation than anxiety. What this means is that the numbers are just grouped a little bit closer. There's less variance than there is with anxiety. With anxiety, the numbers are spread out over a little bit wider range. So I want to look at just a couple of interesting trends. The first one is the average searches by year. So we can see that in 2004, the average number of searches for depression were 79. 2005, it went down to 75. And if we plot this, we can see a really interesting graph, a couple of interesting trends. We can see that anxiety starts off pretty stable, and then from 2010 to about 2018, it shoots up. It actually increases about threefold. Whereas depression, on the other hand, starts off up here at about 80, and it goes down, and then up, and then back up, and then down. But overall, it's decreasing. It starts up here at 80, and it comes back down here to 60. So searches for depression have decreased over the years, while searches for anxiety have increased about 3 times. And this is where that greater standard deviation comes from. This is a much wider range for anxiety. The other thing that I want to look at is the deviation. So we can see here that in January 2004, depression had a result of 80. And the average for all of 2004 was 79.5. So this month was about 0.5 above the average for that entire year. Anxiety was at 31. If we look at the average for that year, it was 32.083. That means this month, anxiety was negative 1.083 below average for the entire year. And if we plot all of those numbers, we get to see another interesting trend. So you can see that people's searches for both depression and anxiety go up and down based on the time of year. Depression is highest in the beginning of the year, then lowest towards the middle. It goes up just a little bit again at the end before coming back down around December. And anxiety is pretty similar, although to a less pronounced degree. It's at its peak around October and September, and it's at its lowest around June. Now, this is the average from 2004 to 2021. What's interesting is if you plot by individual years, we can see, for instance, 2020. This one has a really interesting trend that I want to look at, last part. So on average, we hit our low point for depression in June, July, August, and we hit the peak up here in October, November. Now in 2020, during the pandemic, we are above average during the summer, but then we go below average during the winter. It's relatively stable compared to normal. Anxiety's a little bit different. Now, notice up here too, at the onset of the pandemic, March, April, when the lockdown was just starting, there's this increase, this spike here. Then it comes back down, then it goes above average, then below average. Anxiety is actually the opposite at the onset. When the lockdown just started, we see a dip in anxiety that actually continues until May. Then, kind of like depression, around June it goes above average, and then around October it starts to go below average. Now, I think this is just utterly fascinating. Pandemic hits, and then depression actually ends up, search results for depression end up going a little bit below average. Anxiety too. And for depression, it actually just ends up kind of stabilizing. So this is just a look at some of my analysis of these Google Trends. If you want to see the rest of the data, if you want to look more in depth at this collab notebook, there will be a link in the description. Thank you for watching.